The night before my wedding I went to surprise my fiancé, but outside his house I overheard him whispering plans with his parents, and the truth almost broke me. The night before my wedding I went to surprise my fiancé Daniel. My heart was full of love, my hands holding a small box with the gift I had saved for months to buy. I told myself it would be a sweet memory, something we would laugh about years later. But as I walked up to his house I slowed down because through the still night air, I heard voices, low, urgent, almost secretive. I stepped closer, careful not to make a sound, and then I recognized Daniel's voice. But the words I heard weren't the ones a groom should be saying the night before his wedding. "It's all set, Mom, tomorrow she'll say yes, and after that, everything we've been planning will finally fall into place." My chest tightened, confusion clouding my mind. I pressed my ear closer, and then his mother's voice followed, cold and sharp. "Good, Daniel, just make sure she doesn't suspect a thing. You know how gullible she is, she trusts every word you say. Use that before it's too late." My breath caught in my throat, my palms went cold. I wanted to walk away, to pretend I hadn't heard anything, but my feet refused to move because deep down, I knew this wasn't a harmless conversation. This was something darker, something I wasn't supposed to discover. Then came his father's voice, calm but commanding. "This marriage isn't about love, son, it's about advantage. Once the papers are signed and everything is under your control, she won't even realize what hit her. She'll thank you while you destroy her." My heart pounded so hard I thought they might hear it through the walls. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stop a cry from escaping. The man I thought I knew, the man I was hours away from marrying, was standing inside that house with his parents, plotting something I couldn't fully piece together but already feared. I stepped back slowly, my gift slipping from my hand onto the porch, and for a moment I stood there trembling in the dark, torn between barging in and demanding the truth, or running as far as I could. But I knew one thing for certain. The wedding I had dreamed of wasn't the wedding they were planning for me. I left Daniel's porch that night with my heart beating like a drum, the gift I had brought still lying on the ground, forgotten, my footsteps unsteady as I walked back to the car, every word I had overheard replaying in my mind like a curse. But when I finally stepped inside my house, I was greeted by the warm laughter of my family. My mother was in the living room, carefully adjusting the veil she had been working on for weeks, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "There you are, sweetheart, I was wondering where you went. Tomorrow is the big day and you still sneak out like a child," she teased, not knowing how close I was to collapsing in her arms. My father sat in his chair, tired but proud, the man who had worked himself thin just to make sure my wedding looked like a dream, his voice low but full of love. "You're glowing already, my daughter. Daniel is a lucky man." And then there was my younger brother, running around with the wedding program in his hands, pretending to officiate, making everyone laugh, innocence spilling from him in a way I envied at that moment, because inside me there was no laughter, no joy, only a cold dread that refused to leave. I forced a smile, swallowed the truth burning in my throat, and allowed myself to be pulled into their warmth. But as the night went on, guilt gnawed at me because they were all so happy, so invested. They believed Daniel was the man who would protect and cherish me, and I knew if I told them what I heard, it would crush them as much as it crushed me. Later, when everyone finally drifted to sleep, I sat by the window staring out into the darkness, my wedding dress hanging on the wall beside me, glowing like a ghost in the dim light, and I whispered to myself, what if I'm wrong? What if I misunderstood? What if love really is stronger than what I heard? But the echo of Daniel's voice with his parents was too clear to ignore, and the contrast between their plotting whispers and my family's innocent joy tore me apart inside, leaving me caught between two worlds, one of love and hope and one of betrayal and ruin. As I sat there that night, the shadows of my dress stretching long across the room, I thought about my family and everything they had poured into this wedding. My mother, who had worked late nights sewing my veil by hand because she wanted me to walk down the aisle wrapped in her love. She never had a grand wedding of her own, life had been too hard back then, but she always said, "Your day will be brighter than mine ever was." My father, a quiet man with rough hands, the kind of man who spoke little but did everything for us, he had dipped into his savings, money he had put aside for his old age, just so I could have the wedding of my dreams. He told me it was worth it, that nothing mattered more than seeing me smile in that white dress, and I remembered the look in his eyes, tired but shining with pride. And my brother, still in school, too young to understand the weight of marriage, yet he was the most excited of us all, running around every day making sure no detail was missed. He had even written a silly little speech he said he wanted to read after the vows. It made me laugh when he first told me, but now thinking of it, it only made me cry, because how could I let him stand in front of everyone when the man I was marrying was already planning to break me? We weren't a wealthy family, we never had much, but we had love, real love, the kind that carried us through storms, the kind that made sacrifices without counting the cost, and in their eyes, Daniel was supposed to be the reward for all those sacrifices, the man who would cherish me, protect me, and finally give me the happiness they believed I deserved. But hidden beneath my forced smile, there was only fear, a fear so sharp it felt like a knife in my chest, because I knew that while my family was dreaming of my future, Daniel and his parents were already plotting my downfall, and the secret burned inside me, heavy and poisonous, yet I couldn't tell them, not that night, not when I saw how much joy it brought them to believe everything was perfect. So I sat in silence, clutching my veil against my chest, trying to breathe, trying to hold myself together, all the while wondering, how could I walk down the aisle tomorrow without betraying the very people who gave me everything, and how could I marry a man who was planning to take it all away? As the night stretched on, I found myself staring into the darkness, my mind drifting back to the man I thought I knew. Daniel had always been gentle with me, at least in the beginning. He remembered the little things. How I liked my tea, the way I hated silence when walking home alone. He would send me messages just to remind me I mattered, and he spoke of the future with such conviction that I never doubted him. Those were his green flags, the reasons I let my heart trust him completely. But now, with his whispers still ringing in my ears, I started to see shadows in places I once ignored, the red flags I had buried under excuses, like how sometimes he grew restless when I spoke about my family's struggles, as if my honesty embarrassed him, or the way he never liked when I questioned his plans, brushing me off with a smile and the words, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." I thought it was confidence, but maybe it was arrogance, maybe it was a mask hiding his real intentions. Then I thought about his parents, his mother especially, who always smiled at me but with eyes that never warmed. Her compliments felt sharp, like knives wrapped in silk. "You're such a sweet girl. Daniel is lucky to have someone so humble," she would say, dragging that word out as if to remind me of my place. And his father, though polite, had a way of making me feel like an outsider. His questions always circling around what I could offer, what I could bring, never who I was as a person. I remembered one dinner where his father leaned back in his chair and asked casually, "So, what does your family plan to contribute to the marriage?" The way Daniel shifted uncomfortably told me he didn't want the question asked, but he never defended me either. He never told his father it wasn't about money or status. He just smiled and changed the subject, and I convinced myself it wasn't important, that love was enough. Now, sitting there in the quiet, I realized those little moments weren't harmless after all. They were signs, warnings I refused to see because I wanted to believe in Daniel more than I wanted to see the truth. And that truth was now screaming in my head louder than ever. I pressed my hands to my face, torn between memories of his tenderness and the cruel words I had heard hours ago, wondering which Daniel was real, the one who held me when I cried, or the one who stood with his parents plotting my ruin. Morning came too quickly, the first light creeping into my room as if to drag me into a day I no longer wanted. I hadn't slept. Not a single minute. I just sat staring at the dress hanging by the window, its white fabric glowing in the sun like it was mocking me, a symbol of purity, of love, of promises, when all I felt inside was betrayal. Downstairs, the house was alive with excitement, my mother humming as she fussed with the last stitches on my veil, my father pacing the hallway in his suit, pretending to be calm but glancing at the clock every other second, and my brother darting around carrying small boxes and ribbons, grinning as if today was his wedding too. The air was thick with love and pride, and it made my chest ache. Everyone was looking at me like I was the luckiest woman alive. My mother pressed my hands and whispered, "Today is the beginning of everything you deserve. Don't cry, sweetheart, your makeup will smear." She thought my tears were from joy, but deep inside they were from a dread I couldn't confess. As I sat in the chair while they pinned my hair, my mind kept slipping back to the night before. Daniel's voice promising his parents that I was nothing but a stepping stone, his mother's cold tone, his father's cruel chuckle. I could still hear it like a recording on repeat, and yet here I was being dressed to walk into their trap. When the makeup artist asked if I was nervous, I almost laughed because nervous didn't come close to what I felt. I was terrified. I was sick with the thought that in a few hours I'd be standing in front of him, smiling for the cameras, while he looked at me knowing he had already won. Still, I couldn't bring myself to break the illusion for my family. Not when my father's eyes shone with pride every time he looked at me, not when my mother's hands trembled slightly from excitement, not when my brother clutched my bouquet like it was a crown meant for me. How could I destroy their happiness with the truth? So I smiled, a hollow smile, and let them believe everything was perfect, even as my heart screamed inside, torn between running from the altar and walking into it with the knowledge that I might never come back the same. And as the car finally pulled up to take me to the church, I sat there in silence, my veil falling over my face like a curtain, my thoughts spiraling into one question that refused to leave me. Was I about to marry Daniel, or was I about to marry my own destruction? The church was filled with flowers and whispers of excitement, every pew lined with faces glowing with expectation, cameras flashing as I stepped through the doors, the music swelling like it was carrying me down the aisle. But each step I took felt heavier than the last, as if my dress was woven not with silk but with chains. I lifted my eyes and there he was, Daniel, standing tall at the altar, looking every bit the perfect groom, his smile steady, his suit pressed to perfection, and for a brief second, I wondered if I had imagined everything, if maybe I was a fool for doubting him. But then I caught the glance he exchanged with his parents, a quick flicker of pride and calculation, and my stomach twisted. I walked slowly, clutching the bouquet so tightly my fingers went numb, and yet on the outside, I looked like every other bride, radiant, blushing, walking into her dream. The guests leaned in with soft sighs, my mother dabbed at her eyes, my father stood taller than I'd ever seen him, and my brother beamed like the sun itself, none of them knowing that behind my veil my tears weren't joy but silent panic. When I reached Daniel, he took my hand in his, warm and steady, squeezing it gently as though to reassure me, but instead of comfort, it felt like a trap closing. His eyes locked on mine with that same practiced tenderness, the same look that had made me fall for him, and I wondered how many times I had mistaken manipulation for love. The ceremony began, the priest's voice echoing through the church, words of unity, of promises, of forever, but to me they sounded like chains being fastened, each vow another thread pulling me closer to ruin, and yet the world around me was smiling, believing this was the happiest moment of my life. As the priest turned to me, his voice soft and full of blessing, "Do you take Daniel to be your lawfully wedded husband?" My throat tightened, the words caught like stones. I could feel every eye in the room on me, my mother holding her breath, Daniel's parents leaning forward, Daniel himself staring at me with quiet certainty, confident that I would say yes, confident that I was his. My lips parted but no sound came, my chest heaved as if the truth was clawing its way out, and in that instant time seemed to stop. The church, the people, the music, everything suspended in silence, waiting for me to choose between love, family, and the secret that could destroy it all. The silence pressed down on me like a weight, the priest waiting, the guests leaning forward, Daniel's fingers tightening around mine as if to anchor me, but the more I looked at him, the more I heard his whispers from the night before echoing in my head. This marriage isn't about love, it's about advantage. My chest heaved, my voice trembling, but strong enough to carry through the hushed church. No, I can't. The words fell like glass shattering on marble. Gasps rippled through the pews. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, my father stepped forward in confusion, and my brother dropped the bouquet he was holding for me. Daniel's smile froze, his eyes narrowing just enough for me to see the truth behind the mask he wore so well. The priest blinked, startled. "My dear, are you certain?" I pulled my hand free from Daniel's grip, my fingers shaking but my voice growing steadier. "Yes, I'm certain. I can't marry a man who plots against me with his parents, who speaks of me not as a partner but as a possession." The room erupted in whispers, shock crashing through the air like a storm. Daniel's mother stiffened in her seat, her face drained of color, while his father leaned back, jaw tight, eyes flashing with rage. Daniel tried to step closer, his smile snapping back into place, though his voice cracked with urgency. "What are you talking about? You must be overwhelmed." But I shook my head, my veil trembling with me. "Don't you dare pretend. I heard you last night. Outside your house. I heard every word." Gasps grew louder, some guests covering their mouths, others turning toward Daniel and his parents with disbelief. My mother began to cry silently, my father's face hardened, a storm brewing in his eyes, and for the first time, I saw doubt flicker across the crowd that once adored him. Daniel's mask cracked then, his smile fading as anger flared, but he couldn't lash out, not here, not in front of everyone. He clenched his jaw, whispering sharply under his breath, "You've ruined everything." And I stood taller, my fear slowly replaced with fire, my voice ringing clear through the stunned silence. "No, Daniel. You ruined it yourself." I turned from the altar, the weight of my dress dragging against the marble floor, but with each step I felt lighter, as if every thread was unraveling the chains Daniel had tried to wrap around me. The gasps and whispers of the crowd swirled behind me like a storm, but I didn't stop, not even when my bouquet slipped from my hand and fell forgotten on the aisle. "Wait, Daniel's voice echoed, sharp and desperate now, but I didn't turn back. I could hear his parents rising from their seats, their voices hissing low, trying to manage the scandal unraveling in front of everyone. His mother called my name, her tone suddenly sweet, almost pleading, but I knew better now. I had heard her real voice in the dark, dripping with disdain, plotting my downfall. My father was the first to move, stepping into the aisle as if to shield me, his hand steady on my shoulder. His voice, low but firm, carried through the chaos. You don't need to explain, not here. We've seen enough. My mother rushed to my side, her tears falling freely, though they weren't of shame. They were of relief, of a mother's heart breaking and healing at the same time because her daughter chose herself over destruction. Behind us, the church dissolved into noise. Some guests whispering furiously, others shaking their heads in disbelief, and a few clapping softly, almost as if they admired the courage it took to walk away from a wedding meant to bind me in lies. Daniel's voice grew louder, angrier, his mask finally tearing. You'll regret this. Do you hear me? You'll regret humiliating me like this. His father grabbed his arm, pulling him back, his mother shushing him sharply as they tried to salvage the fragments of their pride. But it was too late. The perfect image they built had cracked in front of everyone. When the church doors opened and the sunlight hit me, the warmth felt like freedom on my skin, and for the first time in weeks I could breathe. My brother darted out behind me, clutching the veil that had slipped from my hair, his voice breaking as he said, I knew you were too good for him. I smiled through the tears, bending down to hug him tightly, my heart aching but stronger than ever. No, I was just too blind. But not anymore. And as the bells tolled above, not for a wedding but for a choice, I walked away from the altar, away from Daniel, away from a future built on betrayal, uncertain of what came next but certain of one thing. I would never again mistake chains for love. Back at home, the house was heavy with silence, broken only by my mother's soft sobs as she removed the pins from my hair, her hands trembling, my father sitting stiffly in his chair, his jaw tight, my brother pacing the room, still too angry to sit still. They all wanted answers but they didn't push me, they waited, letting me gather the courage to speak. Finally, I lifted my head, my voice raw but steady. I didn't walk away because I was scared. I walked away because I heard them. Daniel and his parents. The night before the wedding. Their eyes fixed on me, wide and unblinking as I told them everything. The whispers I overheard outside his house, his mother's cold words, his father's laughter, Daniel's voice agreeing like it was all business, not love. They said this marriage wasn't about me, I whispered, my hands shaking. It was about what they could gain. About using me to access my father's land. About pushing me aside once the papers were signed. They planned to tie me down with vows so I couldn't walk away, and then they would strip me of everything. My father's fists clenched, the veins in his neck rising, his voice low with fury. So that's why he never looked me in the eye when he spoke of the future. My mother gasped, covering her mouth as if the truth itself burned her lips. There came news. One of our relatives who had stayed behind at the church sent word of what happened after we left. Daniel, his voice carrying through the empty hall, had snapped at his parents in anger, shouting about how everything had been ruined. He hadn't even cared that some guests were still lingering, listening. All those years, he had yelled, all those dinners, all those fake smiles wasted. We had her in our hands and now she's gone. And his mother had hissed back, you should have been more careful. We needed that marriage to secure the property, the inheritance, everything. Now we'll have to find another way. The guest had heard every word. By the time they stormed out, their secret was no longer secret. The perfect family they paraded in front of society was shattered. When I heard this, I closed my eyes, a strange calm washing over me. They had exposed themselves. I hadn't just saved myself. I had protected my family from wolves hiding in silk clothing. My father finally stood, his hand on my shoulder, his voice soft but resolute. You did the bravest thing a woman can do. You chose truth over illusion. And now we stand with you. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt safe. Love without respect is only a mask. If someone sees you as a possession or advantage, it's not love, it's control. Red flags ignored today become chains tomorrow. Pay attention to the small signs before they grow into traps. Family love can be your greatest shield. When the world shatters, those who truly care for you will stand firm by your side. Courage at the right moment can change everything. One bold no saved a lifetime of regret. Truth always reveals itself. Masks may fool people for a while, but deceit eventually cracks under pressure. Walking away is sometimes the bravest form of love for yourself. Saying no to the wrong person creates space for freedom, healing, and the right future. What's built on lies cannot last. Daniel's perfect image collapsed the moment the truth was exposed. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories.